Hello again, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for a little bit more of chaos with Tom O'Neill, by Tom O'Neill. Before we get started, so we're in chapter 6, the second part, the final part of chapter 6. I did finally find the account of the raid on Spawn Ranch from Helter Skelter, which I told you was tricky to find, but it's literally, it's like a paragraph. That's it. That's the whole thing on the raid. I'm going to read it to you, but compared to what it actually was, you guys tell me what you think. Okay, so it says, there was an interesting juxtaposition of stories on the B, or lead local news page of Los Angeles Times that Sunday. The big story, Tate, commandeered the top spot with its headline, Anatomy of a Mass Murder in Hollywood. Below it was a smaller story. Its one column heading read LaBianca couple, victims of Slayer, given final rights. To the left of the Tate story, and just above an artist's drawing of the Tate premises, was a much briefer, seemingly unrelated item, chosen, one suspected, because it was small enough to fit the space. Its headline read, Police Raid Ranch, Arrest 26 Suspects in Auto Theft Ring. It began, 26 persons living in an abandoned Western movie set on an isolated Chatsworth ranch were arrested in a daybreak raid by sheriff's deputies Saturday as suspects in a major auto theft ring. According to deputies, the group had been stealing Volkswagens, then converting them into dune buggies. The story, which did not contain the name of any of those arrested, but did mention that a sizable arsenal of weapons had been seized, concluded, the ranch is owned by George Spahn, a blind 80-year-old semi-invalid. It is located in the Simi Hills at 12,000 Santa Susana Pass Road. Deputies said Spahn, who lives alone in a house on the ranch, apparently knew there were people living on the set, but was unaware of their activity. They said he couldn't get around and he was afraid of them. It was a minor story and didn't even raid a follow-up. When a few days later, all the suspects were released, it being discovered that they had been arrested on a misstated warrant. That's it. That's the whole account of the raid on Spawn Ranch from Helter Skelter, which is why it was difficult to find it, because it was such a tiny little blip. Anyways, I think it's interesting, just the discrepancies from, what really happened to Helter Skelter, which supposedly was the official account. Unless, Bugliosi just didn't give it that much importance. I don't know. But anyways, I thought you guys would, I promised it a while back, so I thought I would make good on that. All right, let's finish up chapter 6. The next little section is called Mr. Anonymous. Remember, this chapter is called Who Was Reeve Whitson? And I hope you guys are finding this character interesting. I think, it's mind-blowing. Like, what? It makes you scratch your head so bad. Anyways, let's get into it. As usual, I was anxious to find some way to verify everything I'd read. With Whitson especially, my reporting had crossed the line into conspiratorial territory, and I would be hard-pressed to convert skeptics on the merits of my interviews alone. Of course, clandestine intelligence agencies are exactly the sort of people who don't leave a lot of paper behind. And Whitson, by all accounts, was so savvy that he didn't need to take notes. Remember, he had a photographic memory. I'd filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the CIA asking for any information on him. Their response said that they could neither confirm nor deny Whitson's connection to the agency. FOIA specialists told me that this is the closest one can get to confirmation that someone worked for the CIA. That's interesting. I did eventually find corroboration in print, but it came in a strange form. A manuscript for an unpublished book called 5 Down on Cielo Drive. I tried to find this book. I mean, it was unpublished, but sometimes you can find something out there that somebody just, sometimes the quality's not very good. It's like snapped pictures of it or something, but I couldn't find it. Written around 1974-75, before Helter Skelter, and thus before Bugliosi's telling of the Manson story had ossified into the official narrative. The book had a tortured history, not least because it involved at least 3 authors. The most prominent was Lieutenant Robert Helder, who headed the LAPD's investigation into the Tate murders. Another contributor was Sharon Tate's father, Colonel Paul Tate. Incidentally, I read somewhere else, so you guys know I'm a rabbit hole girl. And so say I'm reading chaos, I'm reading it for you guys. All the while I look into other things that I can find on the subject matter, just so I have maybe more interesting things to say about it, or I just feel like I have more background knowledge. But according to an article I read, which was very conspiratorial, Paul Tate was in like Army intelligence, and yeah, it added a layer of, wait, what? I don't know. It's a total rabbit hole I will not get into right now. But yeah, the Paul Tate character is interesting. Yeah, the more you look into him, the more you scratch your head even more. This case takes so many weird little twists and turns. Paul Tate is definitely one of them. The third author was Roger Frenchy Lajeunesse, an FBI agent who unofficially assisted the LAPD. So, an Army intelligence guy who happened to be one of the victims' parents. An FBI agent who was unofficially assisting, which, how does that happen? I mean, I would imagine you want to get paid for your work. So if you're unofficially helping, what's in it for you? I don't know. It probably was an interesting book, though, just with those 3 being the authors. It's not hard to see the appeal of the book, especially before Helter Skelter. Here were 3 authorities on the case who could give a rich account of it when no such account existed. They secured a contract with the publisher. When too much time passed without a viable book, a ghostwriter came on board. But by the time the manuscript was ready, Bugliosi had beaten them to the punch, and Helter Skelter had claimed the mantle of official Manson book. The deal fell through. In the ensuing years, the 5-down manuscript gained a reputation among researchers and obsessives. It was exceptionally rare. Hardly anyone other than its authors had read it, and even though it was apparently tedious, it was rumored to have the most complete account of the LAPD's investigation, false leads and all. Another journalist passed me a copy. I read the parts about Colonel Tate especially closely. A retired military intelligence officer, Tate had mounted his own inquiry into his daughter's death, separate from but parallel to the LAPD's. Now, I also read somewhere that it's illegal to conduct your own police investigation, so I don't know how this guy got access. They say he retired from the military, but if he was an intelligence officer, I think you would need those kind of special accommodations in order to get information. Like Joe Schmo is not just going to go investigate a murder. How could they? How could they get information? Many had told me that Whitson was under his wing. You wouldn't think that LAPD detectives would have been so keen on 2 outsiders helping them, especially given those outsiders' connections to intelligence. But an LASO detective told me that Colonel Tate appeared to be running the LAPD. What? How? Colonel Tate. So, yes, I get it. His daughter was murdered. She was an important person. He was an important person, apparently. But how do you get that kind of privilege? Then, in his mid-40s, Tate had only recently left the Army to mount his independent investigation. He tried to masquerade as a laid-back Californian, growing a beard and long hair, but he retained the upright carriage of a military officer as he wandered into hippie clubs and drug dens in search of his daughter's murderer, offering a lavish reward to anyone who would help. So this implies that he didn't know who was responsible, but earlier it seemed like Whitson knew something was going to go down and helped Manson stage the scene. So if Whitson and Paul Tate are working together, I can't make heads or tails of that. I don't know. How did Whitson play into this? The 5-down manuscript refers to a Walter Kern, a somewhat shady character who can best be described as a police groupie. Apparently, he had been a friend of Jay Sebring and wanted to help in any way he could. Kern was always one step ahead of the other investigators. Helder wrote, "In this business, as you might imagine, a policeman gets to meet many strange people. Kern was among the strangest. No one knew what he did for a living, yet he always seemed to have money and knew just about everyone on the wrong side of the tracks. I didn't like him, but he was useful." And he kept popping up. When Helder arrived to interview Roman Polanski at the Paramount lot where he was sequestered with Witold Kasanowski, Kern was there, lurking in the shadows. He sure did get around. Believing that Wojtek Frykowski was involved with drug dealers who may have murdered him, Helder instructed Kern to cozy up to anyone who might know them, especially those in Mama Cass's circle. I keep hearing her name come up too, the whole mamas and papas thing. I think I don't know, I gotta look into that a little bit more. In another section of the manuscript, a Hollywood hooker is said to have spoken to Kern, who by now was well known as an amateur sleuth on the case. Kern shared leads and took orders, and yet the man was so shrouded in mystery that Helder referred to him as Mr. Anonymous. It seemed likely to me that there was more to Mr. Anonymous than Helder had shared. By that point, Helder had died, but I had already spoken to Frenchie Lajeunesse, the FBI agent who contributed to 5 Down. I called him again to ask whether Walter Kern was really Reeve Whitson. His answer, yes. So, this guy, Mr. Anonymous, what is his name? Walter Kern, is actually the mysterious Reeve Whitson, which makes you wonder, supposedly he was surveilling the house, A, why? B, some people say he helped Manson move the bodies, and he called the photographer Hatami long before anyone knew the bodies were there. But he's cozied up with Sharon Tate's dad. It doesn't make sense. It's just intriguing, right? In fact, the publishing deal couldn't have happened without Whitson, Lajeunesse said. Reeve Whitson was a part of putting the book together, the linchpin between all of us. It was Lieutenant Helder, the lead investigator for the LAPD, who assigned Whitson the pseudonym of Walter Kern to protect his undercover status. Hardly a step one would take with an ordinary amateur sleuth. Reeve didn't want his name associated with a book, Lajeunesse said, even long after the Manson case had been solved. Not on the jacket, not even in contracts. He didn't even want money, because he was getting money from somewhere else, right? In effect, I now had written proof from the LAPD's head investigator and from Sharon Tate's own father that Reeve Whitson was smack in the middle of the Manson investigation from the start. Lajeunesse didn't know who Whitson worked for, just that he was an astounding fellow who'd been an informant of some kind. He wanted to project an aura of mystery, Lajeunesse said, but the heart of his motivation was an anti-drug conservatism. He was interested in keeping young people away from the curse of narcotics. That's interesting. I mean, we've heard he was a conservative, anti-communist, posing as a communist. Mike McGann, the LAPD detective whom I'd interviewed about the early days of the investigation, remembered Whitson's involvement too. He was heavily involved, McGann said, and he had no need for money. McGann was nearly certain that Whitson was in the CIA and found him very credible. Still, when I said that Whitson had reportedly believed he could have stopped the murders, McGann laughed. Bullshit. He'd talk for 3 hours and never say anything. Typical government employee. A real good line of bullshit. If I could prove once and for all that Whitson was working for the CIA, even McGann might admit that I had a story on my hands. Well, good luck, Tom O'Neill. I mean, how do you prove anyone was in the CIA? Like, the nature of their work is, clandestine, secretive. You're not going to get information. There's no way into it unless you know how to hack into the CIA mainframe, which A, most people don't know how to do, and B, is not recommended if you want to stay out of jail. I don't know. The CIA wasn't even supposed to operate on domestic soil. What could they have been doing messing around with an acid-soaked cult in LA? And if Whitson had been close enough to the murders to stop them, why didn't he? So that's interesting. The CIA is not supposed to operate on domestic soil. I didn't realize that before reading this, because you hear about stuff all the time, like Operation this and that. So much for that, I guess, huh? Everyone agreed that Paul Tate was the key to understanding Whitson. I knew that Tate was still alive, but getting him to open up would be a long shot. His wife and Sharon's mother, Doris, had been comfortable discussing the murder, which is surprising. She'd formed a national victims' rights advocacy group and mobilized it whenever anyone from the family was eligible for parole. Her friend said she believed there was something deeper than helter-skelter behind the murders. Like her husband, she conducted her own investigation through the years, becoming convinced that the Cielo house was under surveillance by some type of law enforcement at the time of the murders. Again, why? Whether she knew that Reeve Whitson had claimed to be watching the house, we'll never know. She was also sure that her daughter wasn't supposed to be home when the killers arrived that night. That's an interesting development. Whoever was watching the house, she believed, had noticed that Sharon's red Ferrari wasn't in the driveway. It was in the repair shop, and concluded that she wasn't there. She planned to write a book about her theories, but she never got to. She was diagnosed with cancer and died in 1992. Paul Tate, rumor had it, had never discussed the case with his wife. That's interesting. I feel like something this major happens in your family and you never discuss the murder of your child with your wife. I don't even want to think about having to talk about something like that with my husband, but we talk about everything that's important, to our family. How is that possible? I don't understand. Before she died, they'd barely spoken to each other, having taken up separate parts of their house. He hadn't spoken publicly about Sharon's death since Manson had been captured, and he'd already declined an interview with me once. But I phoned him again in May 2000, telling him I'd gotten a copy of 5 Down on Cielo Drive and planned to quote it. That got him to agree to meet with me. That's interesting. That's the same thing I heard that with Melcher, that's how he got the interview with him, because he felt like, oh shoot, he has something and I want to know what it is, so I will talk to this guy before he puts something about me, aka Terry Melcher, in the book. But as the date approached, he canceled on me. We rescheduled and he canceled again. When he called to cancel yet another meeting, I tried to butt in with a question about Reeve Whitson before he could get off the phone. He was receptive, at first anyway. Reeve was my main person to help me, Tate said. He'd been a friend of Roman Polanski and Sharon and mine and Jay Sebring. He was very, very helpful. Again, if he had been a friend of Roman Polanski and Sharon and Jay, is that what his name is? Whatever, Paul Tate. Sorry about that, guys. My brain kind of blinked out there. And Jay Sebring, and he was a CIA officer. Now, there's a lot of theories out there that Hollywood in general, they're all a bunch of spooks. I linked an article about that a while back. I will link it again in this one because it was talking about the mamas and papas being spooks. And like this, it sounds conspiratorial, but I love a good conspiracy theory. And yeah, this CIA dude, why is he so chummy with everyone? But then again, why would he help? Obviously, if he was chummy with Manson and helped him move the bodies too, it doesn't add up. It does not add up. Even so, Tate found it ridiculous that Whitson's friends were going around saying that he could have prevented the murders. That simply wasn't true, he said. Could he help me clear it up, having contributed so much to the investigation? I contributed. Just put in there I contributed nothing. But you were involved in the investigation, I said. You wrote a book about it. Yeah, well, did you ask Reeve to do the undercover work, or did someone else? I'm not going to answer those questions, he said, impatience creeping into his voice. Could he at least tell me who Whitson worked for? He refused. Why not? I don't have to tell you that, he nearly shouted. Out of desperation, I made a foolish mistake. Sometimes when I sensed that someone was withholding something sensitive, I'd remind the person that, in all the speculation about Manson himself, the basic, brutal loss of human life was too often the first thing people stopped thinking about. So I said, just out of respect to the victims, don't you think? Keep in mind, one of the victims was his daughter. Paul Tate sounded 1,000,000 miles away to me, and he had a gruff, emotionally detached tone, befitting his military background. But he was, first and foremost, Sharon Tate's father, a man who'd lost a child to an unimaginable horror, who'd seen her death become a kind of shorthand for tabloid atrocities. I'd forgotten that truth, and my comment understandably upset him. I regretted it right away. Out of respect for the victims, he shouted, "What kind of fuck do you think I am?" He laughed bitterly. "You go ahead and do whatever you want. But if any son of a bitch ever had any respect for the victims, it was me." "I apologize," I said. "I didn't mean it to sound the way it came out." "Okay," he said. "Bye-bye." And that was the end of my relationship with Paul Tate, the man who knew better than anyone what Reeve Whitson was up to. He died in 2005. All right, the next section is called The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Helder had written that Whitson knew just about everyone on the wrong side of the tracks. The opposite was true too. He knew how to pull the levers of power. Colonel Tate was just one of his friends in high places. Usually in the same breath, Whitson's friends named another military bigwig, General Curtis LeMay. I mean, that is a bigwig. He was in, if you recall, the autopsy of Kennedy. So this guy, Reeve Whitson, is hobnobbing with lowlifes like Charles Manson, allegedly, all these Hollywood types, military intelligence types, and this General Curtis LeMay. I mean, this dude knew everybody. He is definitely a mysterious man. We're probably never going to know much more about him unless Tom O'Neill writes another book and discloses something, because I've looked around too. Mind you, I don't have the resources that a journalist has, of course, but there is not much out there to find about this dude. As discussed earlier, LeMay was part of the unsettling story I'd heard from Jay Sebring's barber, Little Joe. One of Sebring's clients, the mobster Charlie Barron, had called Joe after Sebring's murder, pledging that no harm would come to the barber. Charlie Barron was a friend of Curtis LeMay, too. Meetings between the two were noted by the FBI, who surveilled Barron for decades. LeMay, a former Air Force officer nicknamed Bombs Away LeMay, had retired in '65 and turned to defense contracting, where one critic feared that he could be more dangerous than when he was the Air Force Chief of Staff. He moved to LA to become the vice president of a missile parts manufacturer. But it fizzled, as did LeMay's brief political career. After that, Mr. Bombs Away had spent his retirement roaming the city with Mr. Anonymous. So he retired from the military and is just roaming the city with this mysterious guy, Reeve Whitson. I mean, this is literally the guy who was in the room when Kennedy's autopsy was being performed, blowing smoke from his cigar. In fact, the doctors were like, "Who is smoking in here? Get that cigar out of here." And it's reported that he was like, basically like, F off, I'm gonna do what I want, and like blew smoke into their area. Interesting. I added a few more connective arrows to the big whiteboard on my wall. Incidentally, there's a picture of it. The whiteboard web. Realizing more than ever that its tangle of lines and circles made sense only to me. Though I never figured out what LeMay and Whitson got up to together, it was plausible that they were tied up in Charlie Barron's cabal of right-wing Hollywood friends. Now that's something you don't hear ever. Right-wing and Hollywood together. You hear left-wing and Hollywood together. So this is interesting. The ones who, Little Joe told me, had done terrible things to Black people. George Wallace, who'd chosen LeMay as his running mate in his 68 presidential bid, was among the nation's most notorious racists. So maybe the Black Panthers ties into this somehow. I'm not sure. I'm sure he knew Barron, Whitson's friend John Irvin told me, a British film director who himself claimed to have ties to MI5. Irvin said that Whitson got meetings within minutes at the highest levels of the defense industry. It was amazing. I mean, who is this guy? He was on the fringes of very far-out research for the government, not discussed openly because it verges on the occult. He added that Whitson had very good connections with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office and pull with immigration officials, as Shara Khatami had said. So maybe he could have gotten him deported or something, or helped grease the wheels for getting citizenship. Who knows? Anything's possible with this guy, it seems like. But Irvin couldn't elaborate on any of this. Then came Otto and Ilsa Skorzeny, the most sinister of Whitson's friends. They were Nazis. Genuine German, dyed-in-the-wool Nazis. The United Nations listed Otto Skorzeny as a war criminal. He'd been one of Hitler's most trusted operatives, leading the manhunt of one of the Fuhrer's would-be assassins and spearheading a secret mission to rescue Mussolini. You guys, if this is not like 007 intriguing spy stuff, are you intrigued? I mean, I sure hope you are. I know the first time I read this book, my mouth was just on the floor so many times. After the Third Reich fell, Skorzeny safeguarded the wealth of countless Nazis and helped disgraced war criminals settle into new lives around the world. Brought to trial before a U.S. military court, Skorzeny was alleged to be the most dangerous man in Europe. And he's hanging out with Reeve Whitson too. But he was acquitted, having made himself an asset to U.S. intelligence. Kind of like the Operation Paperclip stuff, you know. Certain Nazis were protected because they had something to offer. Which is diabolical, if you ask me. His wife, the Countess Ilsa von Finkelstein, was once a member of the Hitler Youth, a shrewd businesswoman known for her beauty and charm. She negotiated arms deals and contracts for German engineering companies. Irvin had met Ilsa many times through Whitson. So he knows this other, like he introduced these top Nazis. Intriguing. Whitson could look past any ideology, no matter how abhorrent, if someone proved useful to him. Obviously, if he's hobnobbing with Nazis. His friends construed him as the purest form of cold warrior, lifted from the spy who came in from the cold. I don't know if that's a book or what it is, but I say lifted from James Bond because that's something I'm more familiar with. He carried an outmoded 50s era politics into the future, masquerading as a hippie, infiltrating an LSD cult, and befriending Nazis to eliminate the scourge of communism and narcotics. So he had a noble cause, is that what they're trying to tell us? The latter being, to his mind, a direct extension of the former. He believed there was an operation to destabilize American youth. One friend told me, Russians were bringing drugs in to battle the American system from within. They call that asymmetric warfare. Having worked in South America, Whitson believed we should kill the drug lords in Bolivia and their whole families. If there's a baby, you take out the baby. I don't think he would say something like that and not be capable of doing it. He didn't believe in the individual, but in the larger picture. Another acquaintance recalled the entire Manson situation, the Black Panther movement, and probably similar other movements. People like that were discredited by certain things that, according to Reeve, may have been staged or done by government authorities in order to make them look bad. Now, if you want to go down a real tinfoil hat rabbit trail, there are people out there that believe that the whole Manson murders were a hoax. And they show pictures. You guys are going to laugh. You're gonna laugh. I can link the article down below if you're interested in reading it. It's like 100 pages and it shows crime scene pictures and everything. But it shows how the pictures reinforce their belief that it's a hoax. I don't know if, I don't know, might they have staged something to change, social engineering, basically. They said, people said that the whole 60s died, the flower power movement, all that, when the Manson murders happened. So you hear about all these operations, Operation Gladio, Operation Chaos, Operation COINTELPRO, and they were to basically infiltrate activist groups and neutralize them. And if this was sort of the main thing that took down the whole hippie movement, although Woodstock did happen after this, I don't know, would that be a big enough reason to fake an entire, I mean, it sounds absurd, I know, but when you look at some of the pictures, you're like, that's interesting. And if you're really interested, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, look up, there's a place called Lookout Mountain, which is basically a military base inside this same canyon that was used to make, supposedly to make films to influence basically society at that time as well. So I guess it's not 100% out of the realm of possibility. I know it sounds crazy, but I will link the article to it and you guys can make your own decision on that. Okay, I got sidetracked. Where were we? If I could find out where Whitson's money came from, I might be closer to understanding what he actually did. His resume was scant from the 50s through the 70s, after which it covered more ground than seemed possible for a single life. He was a special advisor to the chairman of the board of Thyssen, among the largest corporations in Germany. So he was a special advisor to the chairman of the board, one of the largest corporations in Germany. He sank years into a scheme to construct a maglev monorail train. I don't know what that means, maglev. Stretching from Las Vegas to Pasadena. He wanted to build a Brigadoon theme park in Scotland. He was involved in weapons manufacturing, early iterations of the Miss Universe pageant, and a new variety of childproof medicine bottle. And he had a passion for race cars, building them, selling them, driving them, which may explain how he befriended Jay Sebring, another race enthusiast. That is a very eclectic resume for sure. But if you're an actor and if you're a spy, and I mean, maybe every little thing was just an act. I don't know. These ventures had one thing in common. They fell through. The easiest explanation, of course, was that they were covers. See? And sometimes Whitson told his friends as much. So where did his money come from? No one knew. He always paid in cash. He stowed it in his freezer. And when he had it, he was quick to settle a tab. Whitson dressed in gabardine suits, but for much of his adult life, an ex-girlfriend recalled, he lived like a hermit, sleeping on a cot in his parents' kitchen. You'd think they would at least have a bedroom for him. Cot in the kitchen. The man who loved fast cars drove an economical Ford Pinto. In his final years, Whitson was destitute and disgruntled, telling rueful stories of the Quarry, his term for the section of the CIA he worked for, and trash-talking the agency. Once you're in, he told a friend, you're really a pawn. I've heard this in other accounts from other ex-CIA people too. Like once you're in, you're theirs for life, which sounds like an intriguing line of work, but who wants that? Who wants to be a slave to a government agency, for heaven's sake? In his dying days, the government had said, you didn't even exist to us. Even the movies were no reprieve, offering reminders of his glory days. About a year before he died, seeing the thriller The Pelican Brief, Whitson leaned over in the dark of a cinema and told a friend, I wrote the yellow papers on everything that happened. With a hint of nostalgia, he explained that yellow papers, detailed interrogation techniques, let's just say they're too graphic to describe on YouTube. Whitson died at the relatively young age of 63. With no health insurance, he left behind an enormous unpaid hospital bill, something to the tune of $500,000. Now you would think if he was retired from the CIA. Most government jobs have pensions. I know my dad was just, in the Navy and had health insurance for the rest of his life, basically, until he got Medicare. So I don't know. That seems odd to me that he had no health insurance. He must have been, he must have been sick if the hospital bill was something to the tune of $500,000. If you ever read an itemized hospital bill, he might not have even been that sick for it to be that high, sadly. A few of my sources felt there may have been foul play. He'd given conflicting explanations for his health problems: a heart attack, or a spider bite, or a brain tumor, or lymphoma. I think he committed suicide, his daughter told me. His greatest fear was to be a vegetable. So, okay, I could see that if you do have some kind of terminal illness, how you might, choose that rather than be sick. All right, we are on to coda, neither confirm nor deny. So this is the last little bit of chapter 6. Reeve Whitson was a walk-in, as one of my sources put it, an extraterrestrial. Once he consumed me, I found myself fixating on possibilities that I would have dismissed as insane only months before. His life opened onto a vantage of intrigue, where Manson and the 60s counterculture were just one element in a political struggle that encompassed Nazis, Cuba, Vietnam, South America, military intelligence, and Byzantine matters of national security. But Whitson was too much the mystery man he was said to be. He brought my reporting to a standstill. At a certain point, I felt I'd learned everything I could about him without tapping official sources. I'd attempted to find his tax records and ask reporters with stronger connections at Langley if they could look him up. Now, does Tom O'Neill have those kind of connections? Stronger connections at Langley. They never found anything. FOIAs to the FBI, the Secret Service, the DEA, the ATF, the IRS, and the military all got responses that said they had nothing to do with him. It was only the CIA that gave me the neither confirm nor deny response. Later, responding to my appeal, it wrote that Whitson had no open or officially acknowledged relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency. I worry that I'll never know the truth about Reeve Whitson. There is, of course, the possibility that he was little more than an effective con artist, someone who weaseled his way into a minor role in the Manson investigation by sweet-talking people in power, someone who's constantly implying to his friends that he's in the CIA, might not be very effective as an undercover agent. That's true. Like I said that early on, I think most CIA agents are not blabbing that that's what their job is, right? If Whitson were truly a high-functioning member of the intelligence community, would anyone have had any idea? On the other hand, maybe the stories I heard are fundamentally correct. Whitson was an intelligence agent who led a storied international career, and he wasn't exaggerating when he said that he could have stopped the Manson murders. If that was true, what then? Why would the CIA or any intelligence group have had Whitson infiltrate the family, and what did Manson know about it? The bottom line was that I'd learned just enough about Whitson to dwell on him. It was as his daughter said, he gives a little and then he goes away. And that is the end of chapter 6. What did you guys think of that? Did you enjoy? Are you intrigued even more? I hope so. I know I was. Oh, I gotta shift. What did you think about the Helter Skelter account of the raid on Spawn Ranch? Pretty sparse, right? I mean, especially for the biggest raid in California history up to that point. I don't know. It seems like weird that it was so just offhandedly mentioned in Helter Skelter, like no big deal. Yeah, I don't know. This Reeve Whitson guy, if I can see why Tom O'Neill was like, wait, what? Like, it just doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. Even just, I don't know, any of it. His whole story is so crazy. He knows everybody. Who is he? I mean, if he's just a con artist, how is he getting in with all these top military guys? It does not make sense. I mean, I don't know that we're ever going to find out. It's the sad part. But we're going to keep on going. Oh, I got the hiccups, guys. Sorry. We're going to keep on going. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm going to take a little break and then on to chapter 7. All right, take care, you guys. See you in the next one.